Hey friend, welcome to my podcast, The Fit Soul. I'm your host, Amy Ramsey. In this podcast, we will be discussing soul-filled strategies to unleash your confidence, increase your energy, and all the things healthy lifestyle. If you're a Christian woman who is ready to reach your God-given potential, walk worthy of your calling with abundant joy and energy, girlfriend, you are in the right spot. I mean, you only have one life to live. You might as well maximize it. Buckle in, and thanks for listening. Hello, and welcome back to the Fit Soul podcast. I shared with you last week that I have some special interviews coming up, and today I am beyond excited to share my friend who is a friend, but a therapist, and we have the same passion to seeing women walk worthy and to walk in freedom and liberty. And we had she made a comment on an obscure Facebook post that captured my attention. And I reached out to her. I'm like, tell me more about this. And so I'm going to share a little bit more about that. But before I introduce my guest, what I wanted to do is just share a little bit of my own story with perfectionism and shame. And so we're talking today about the perfectionism and shame proneness connection. She intrigued me when she said that because it made a lot of sense. Have you ever heard someone speak and somehow or another, maybe you've never heard it just put that way, but all of a sudden, the way that words are formulated, it's almost like a frying pan smack you in the face and you're like, what? You understand at a very deep and clear level. In her little bitty comment on an obscure Facebook post did that to me. I'm like, oh my gosh. So we hopped on the phone and had an incredible conversation. I said, please, I've got to bring you on because I know so many of you are struggling with perfectionism. And I know so many of you are struggling with shame. And isn't it interesting that there is a connection between the two? I know in my own life, shame kept me shackled. There was a time that shame was suffocating my life, and I didn't know there was another way. It sounds weird to even hear it come out of my mouth now because I understand what a lie that was and how many broken beliefs that I had and the woundedness from the place that was birthed. But that was my truth. That was my compass north. That's what I believed with every bit of my being. And I just want to encourage you right now, if you are in a place to where you are feeling stuck in cycles of shame, stuck in perfectionism, like you feel stuck because you just can't move forward because you're not good enough. You're not enough. Any of those worthiness issues, this podcast will enlighten you. It will encourage you. And I want to see you walk in liberty, walk in freedom. God wants you doing that. God wants you to be vibrant with every bit of the life that you have. Listen, we're not promised tomorrow. We're not. And so to live fully, to live alive is to live without perfectionism and to live without shame. And there is a way. There's a way to walk worthy. It is a more excellent way. But what a lot of us need to do is do some mindset work, to do some identity work, to break some chains, to recognize the broken beliefs. And I'm delighted to bring Rachel Stuart onto the podcast, onto the show today, and to help you see where you might fall in this. So buckle in, my friends. This show is going to be excellent. Okay, Rachel, hello and welcome.
Hi, Amy, and thank you so much for that beautiful introduction.
I am so grateful to have you here. We met. I don't even know where we met, Rachel. I'm assuming it's in the gym somewhere.
It would be the YMCA gym.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So now, were you a part of the stack program when I was managing that in the back in the personal training, or did you come after?
I came after that. I was doing the boot camp classes that they had back there. And I think you had filled in for a coach at one point teaching some of the boot camp classes. And that was how we met.
Okay. Okay. Great. Awesome. So my background is teaching group exercise and personal training. And there was for a while, I ran the gym back there. We did it. It was actually, so anyway, that's a whole nother story. But okay. So we met in workout class. Okay. She's just one of these, you look at her and you're like, oh my gosh, she is serious in the gym. She ain't playing. And sister runs but she doesn't run like I do. I ran 25 half marathons. Anybody could, I mean, I would tell most people, you can do it if you had the mindset that I do. Now, running like you, no. Oh my gosh. She runs a marathon in like, I don't know, 33 minutes or something like that.
No. Well, no, definitely not that fast. But
Not quite that fast, but not far from it. So she is a machine in the beast. She's a beast in the gym. She's amazing. And then you go and talk to her, and she has this sweet, precious heart of kindness and compassion, and a beautiful family and a little boy. And I've just been impressed with you since I've met you, Rachel.
well, the feeling is definitely likewise, Amy. This
Oh,
incredible work that you do with women and helping them walk in their worthiness and their truth. And, it's definitely, you're an inspiration.
oh, well, amen. And thank you. Um, okay. So I want to give a formal introduction of who you are and why you are so qualified to come and speak to this topic. So I'm going to read to you a little bit about Rachel's background here. She's a licensed professional counselor in the state of Mississippi with 5 years of experience, also working in community mental health center, providing individual and group psychotherapy while coordinating senior psychosocial rehabilitation programs for residents in a nursing facility. She's been working with BetterHelp to provide individual therapy services since 2017. She has a bachelor's degree in psychology, a master's degree in mental health counseling from Mississippi College. She's also a national board certified counselor. And most importantly, she is extremely dedicated and passionate to help others find meaning and a way to transcend the pain that is inherent in this existence. She works with specialties at areas of depression, anxiety, bereavement, trauma, and adjusting to difficult life's transitions and addressing feelings of low self-worth, shame, meaningless, isolation, and helplessness. She has a myriad of different ways that she helps. And it's not just women. We have mostly women, Rachel, on this show, but you serve men and women, right?
Yes. And my client base is predominantly female, but I
Okay.
do have female clients and love working with males as well.
Awesome. So she uses an integrative action orientation approach to therapy to help people to focus on issues they'd like to address and develop goals and expectations for the future. She uses a variety of methods and approaches to address relevant background issues, emotions, underlying thoughts and assumptions, and actions impacting the present situation. She uses a humanistic approach to draw upon many practices of internal family systems theory, narrative therapy, dialectic behavioral therapy, and cognitive behavioral therapy. So incredible. And she loves the Lord, and she loves to talk about this from a faith perspective. So amazing. So again, welcome. So glad that you're here. And I'm looking forward to your thoughts and your wisdom and expertise on this area.
Yes. And I'm so excited to be here. I think this is a topic that needs to be talked about more. You know, shame is one of those things that a lot of us, we don't even like saying the word, but it's something that universally we all will experience at some point in our life. And it can be an incredibly painful thing to walk through. So talking about this and talking about how this can manifest in perfectionism is so important to help people recognize, like you did when I made that comment, you're like, oh gosh, that is the connection. I didn't put these two things together, but now I can see how this perfectionism has been a function of shame.
So good. Yeah. No, so good. Let me ask you this, Rachel. When we're thinking about this perfectionism and shame connection, um, you and I were talking before we hit record, ways that perfectionism, oftentimes people have perfectionistic tendencies, or they might be a perfectionist but not recognize it and realize it because maybe their house is messy, but they're struggling somewhere else. So can you help us identify maybe some how could we notice that maybe we are a perfectionist or we've got perfectionist tendency?
Sure, absolutely. And you're right, just because the perfectionism does not show up in one area of your life. Like, for example, it may not show up with cleanliness and order in your home. You may say, oh my gosh, how could I possibly be a perfectionist? Have you seen my junk drawers? Have you seen my closets? There's no way I'm a perfectionist. Well, it may not show up and manifest in that way for you, but for that person, it may be perfectionism around body image, achieving the ideal size and shape. Um, it may be about being a good enough parent, right? Like, am I being the best mom that I can be? Am I doing the best I can do? Children. It could be about being the best Christian, right? Like, am I completely free from sin? Am I really living my life in every aspect of it in a way that honors God? Are all of my thoughts pure? And
Mm-hmm.
I think we know that that's unrealistic to achieve those kinds of standards, right? That we cannot possibly be this perfect mom, this perfect Christian, that perfection is not really a human attribute,
Oh,
but yet it's something that we will continue to strive for and fall short, which can lead to that feeling like a failure, feeling like you're not good enough, feeling ashamed.
oh my goodness, that is beautiful. Yeah, I can't remember which verse it is. I want to say it's Proverbs or Psalms, maybe it's Isaiah, but that about perfectionism, that there is one that is perfect, and it's
Mm,
God, but he is doing a perfecting work in us. And what that meant is he's putting on the finishing touches in our life. And I love that. I love to think about, okay, I don't have to be perfect. God's doing the finish. He's putting on my finishing touches, and he will be until I take my final breath. That's part of being a human.
absolutely. And he is glorified in our imperfection and
Oh,
in
yeah.
our,
Yes,
right?
preach that. Yeah, preach that. So body image, being a parent, being a Christian, that was so interesting to hear all of those ways. And I know I could identify on so many of those levels. And what do you feel, Rachel, is what's the driving behavior for us to need to feel like we're looking like we're perfect or trying to achieve this unattainable status? What is the driving behavior here?
That's a great question. And the driving behavior for perfectionism is really trying to avoid any disapproval by others, right? If I if I'm perfect, if I'm flawless, or if I appear that way, then I am beyond reproach. I am beyond criticism. They cannot reject me. They cannot condemn, right? So perfectionism is it's not really about self-improvement at its core. I think a lot of times people confuse that and they think, oh, well, isn't perfectionism a good thing? Isn't it good to have high standards and to be ambitious and to push myself towards the best? But really, perfectionism can get in the way of those goals, can be a very self-defeating and addictive behavior that is more about trying to control the perception of others than it is about your internal motivation to pursue your goals.
Okay. Wow. That was just kind of a lot to unpack. Can you say the last thing? An addictive behavior did you say control your perception of others'
Sure.
perception of you?
Yeah, it's perfectionism is a self-destructive and addictive belief system. Okay. So it fuels this primary thought that if I look perfect and if I do everything perfectly, then I can avoid or I can minimize painful feelings of blame, of judgment, of shame, of rejection from others.
Mm, 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 mm. Wow. Um, it's such a deep topic. There's so much to be said around each one of those of the core driving behaviors. Um, is there a little perfectionist in everyone?
Absolutely. And, I like the way that you put it. Yes, there's this little perfectionist in everyone, because that's taking perfectionism and saying, this is not my identity. Because that's dangerous too, when people take this on as if it's some unchangeable characteristic of who they are, right? Like, well, I'm just a perfectionist and I'll always be that way. Because then you feel like you're powerless to change it.
Mm,
And the truth is, this is a behavior. This is something that you're doing or something that you've experienced, or you may have a part of you that is a perfectionist, right? And I love the language of parts. That's something that is used in internal family systems approach to therapy. And that's taking this tendency, this attribute, right? Okay, so I have this tendency towards perfectionism that's saying, well, no, that's not you. That's part of you,
mm,
right? And a lot of times I talk to my 7-year-old about this and I'm like, because he struggles with perfectionism as well. And I'll talk about perfect boy. And that's what I call that part of him that tells him, well, if I can't be the absolute best at it, if I can't get first place, then I'm not going to do it. Or, if I can't be good at it right away, then I'm not going to keep trying because I only want to do things that I know I'm going to be the best at. And so I'll say, oh, that's perfect boy. He's the one telling you all of those things. And let's kind of talk about that together and why perfect boy might actually be wrong about some of those things.
mm, mm. Oh, wow. Yeah. How nice to have a therapist as a mother. You can help. Maybe he can, it'll help him avoid so much therapy later in life.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That is awesome. So, what I'm really hearing you say here, and what I want to highlight is that perfectionism is a behavior, but the problem can become when we attach it as an identity, which we're about to talk about because you and I both have very strong opinions on this. But if it's a behavior, um, if it's a behavior, it can be changed. It's not who you are. And this is empowering to understand that if you have perfectionistic tendencies, or if you label yourself a perfectionist, that you can actually do some work. Now you got to do the work, but you can overcome that and get your power back. Am I understanding that correctly?
Absolutely. Yes. 100%.
Amazing. And I think there's so much freedom in that because there are some lines of thinking out there in our society, in our culture, of labels that are become identity, and women feel stuck in that. Like I shared at the top of the podcast, my own story. I wouldn't have thought that would have given myself a label. It was just who I thought I was. I didn't feel like I was enough ever because of past mistakes. So I labeled myself with failures, and it had a whole host of bag of wounds that came with it. And that's where I stayed in that wounded state. And it was so disempowering. It was so, I was so broken. But I thought that was the best for me. I thought that was just the way it was. I didn't realize that there was another. So maybe here's what are some questions that one maybe can ask themselves if they think that maybe they're a perfectionist or maybe they're struggling a little bit. What are a few things that they could say to themselves?
Sure. There's definitely some common signs you can kind of look out for, right? That tell you, okay, this might be something that is affecting me, even if you didn't realize it, even if you never, labeled it as perfectionism in your life, right? Common things that people who struggle with perfectionist behavior experience are struggling to make decisions in a timely manner.
Indecisiveness. Okay, yeah.
There's that fear of making the wrong decision, right?
Yes. Oh my gosh. I used to be so indecisive. Super interesting. Okay.
Uh-huh. Reassurance seeking. That once you have made the decision, you're going around and you're polling all these people around you and saying, do you think I'm making the right choice? Does that sound okay to you? You need to get that approval from other people rather than being able to trust your own judgment.
Mm, 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 mm.
It can also be excessive organizing, preparation, list making. These are the people who they may spend hours, days, weeks, months preparing to do something. They're doing all this research. They're like, oh, I'm just not ready to start yet. I have to keep getting organized. I have to, do a little bit more research. And so that need to do that can actually hold them back from getting started on meaningful things to them, right? Because they feel like they need to get it perfect before they begin.
Wow. Okay. That is so good. Yes, 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 yes. I have a feeling, oh my goodness. As you were listening to this, I just want you to allow yourself curiosity in this and non-judgment. Just a place of, yeah, that sounds like me. And yeah, okay, I can check that list too. And hold space for curiosity to explore how to overcome this. So, Rachel, what is the solution to start stepping out of this perfectionistic cycle?
Well, and I definitely want to talk about that before we move on, I kind of want to hit a few more of the really key signs of, perfectionism. Just
Oh, yes, please. Absolutely.
Yeah. A big one is procrastination. Again, it's
yeah.
of like, all right, well, if you're putting this pressure on yourself to get it perfect, right? This flawless performance or flawless paper that you're going to turn in, right? It seems overwhelming to get started, right? Because you're like, oh my gosh, this task seems monumental now. Well, because you know it's going to be so difficult, you may keep putting it off, right? Whereas if you were putting this pressure on yourself to get it absolutely flawless, it might not seem that daunting. And you might be able to just get started and know, okay, well, there might be a lot of rough drafts, and that's okay. I'm going to make some mistakes and I'll correct those. And it's fine. I can get started. But perfectionism will tell you, no, you can't make mistakes and it has to be flawless. So that can kind of put you in this paralysis of not being able to get started.
Mm-hmm. So good.
And it can also manifest in not knowing when to stop. Clients that I've worked with who especially are still in school will say, I have actually gotten points deducted from a paper or an assignment because I couldn't stop revising it and tweaking it. I never got to the point where I felt like it was good enough to turn it in. So even though the student may have had this A paper, this excellent paper, the perfectionism would not allow them to turn it in, and they miss the deadline, and maybe they sacrifice a whole letter grade. And I know that's going to happen, right? So this seems irrational, but for someone who's that deeply caught in the perfectionism, they just couldn't bring themselves to submit it on time,
Mm,
right?
mm, mm, mm. Yeah. Yep. I see myself in each one of these symptoms that you're talking about in some form, or and especially before, when I was stuck in the shame, that place of so much shame. Each one of these.
Yeah, they're very common, you know, things to experience. And a lot of people may not necessarily put it together with perfectionism until you kind of hear all of these signs together like this. And you're like, oh, wow. Hey,
Yeah,
I'm really resonating with a lot of this.
absolutely, absolutely. Where is the shame proneness connection with this? Is it just that not being good enough in these scenarios, lack of worthiness? What is that connection?
So the problem with perfectionism is that oftentimes we have these unreasonable and self-defeating ambitions of getting something just absolutely right, right? And so when we inevitably fall short of those impossible standards, that's when we start feeling bad about ourselves, right? We start seeing or missing the mark as evidence of our own ineptitude,
Mm,
right? And something being wrong with us. That's where that shame can set in.
mm-hmm. Impossible standards, unreasonable expectations. And, as I'm writing this, as I'm thinking about you saying this, what I want to do is just like go right here and almost shine a light on that, because you would never set a goal if you thought it was impossible, an impossible standard. You would never do something if you think it's an unreasonable expectation. So, how does one start to question, is this impossible, or am I trying to do too much at one time? What is a reasonable expectation for me, for XYZ, fill in the blank? How can we start to make that connection to where it's a healthier view of ourselves and moving forward with our actions?
And that's an excellent question because, you know, perfectionism really does become a problem when we under budget for how difficult
Mm,
something is going.
mm,
For example, if you are not a runner and you decided, hey, I've got this goal, I want to run a marathon and I want to run it in under 2 hours. Okay. Well, if you didn't know a whole lot about racing and, the time that it would take the average person to run a marathon, the amount of training that goes into that, the years that go into that, you might set that goal and not know, oh, this is unrealistic, possibly unattainable,
mhm,
right? So some of it has to do with kind of reality checking
mhm,
these goals you're setting for yourself. You know, Not necessarily comparing your journey with someone else's, but recognizing that you may not be seeing all of the behind the scenes that went into that person's achievement,
that's right.
right?
Yeah.
You're seeing maybe this post about, their success that they've had in business. And, you're looking at that outcome, but you're not seeing all of the setbacks, all of the failures, all of the hours, years, however long it was, the hard work that went in getting to that place. And so that's when it becomes problematic, is when we under budget for how difficult something is going to be, and we don't make room for mistakes and failures along the way to achieving those goals.
Oh, so good. So good. This is some of the work that we do in my Walkworthy mentorship, actually. Some of this is just realistic goals. What does that look like? I'm convinced women, the perfectionism stops them from even pursuing goals because they don't think they're capable of it, or they set unrealistic goals, but they don't understand that it's not a realistic goal and how to actually move the needle forward and to create healthier habits or whatever the goal is. I've learned from studying and, how to help execute it, but I did it the wrong way so much. Bit off more than I could chew, had unrealistic expectations over myself, not understanding how hard a project is going to be and take. And then when you lack that flexibility, then you can take on the identity of, okay, it's not perfect. I can't do this, or I'm not good enough, or I'll never measure up, or I'm a failure. And all of that just leads into that shame cycle. And Rachel, one of the things that I really enjoyed when we were talking on the phone the other day, just doing the legwork for this podcast, is that you and I both believe strongly with the faith piece. When we add that in here, part of the problem is broken identity. When you are a believer, when you're a Christian, your identity becomes who Christ says that you are, which is worthy in his eyes, a daughter of the king, a royal heir. You are fully beloved, fully known, fully seen by the Heavenly Father. And when we don't understand our identity, and listen, I had heard that word for so many years, but I did not. I heard it in my head. I read it in the Bible, but it was incongruent with how I felt. And I didn't understand how to actually break that cycle until I came in and did more work with neuroscience and learned how to actually prime my brain. And these, again, are things that I teach in my program. And I'm sure you do that plus a million times deeper with therapy as you're a trained professional as a therapist with a Christian. When we can go identity level with a Christian, oh my gosh, tell me what your thoughts are around that and the power of understanding who you are and whose you are to overcome shame and perfectionism.
Absolutely. You know, in the Bible, we see shame first show up in connection to original sin, right? It's in Genesis 3 that Adam and Eve recognize their nakedness. And what does it cause them to do? It causes them to hide, right? Separate them from that perfect love of the Creator. And that's what shame wants to do to us. Shame is a weapon that the enemy can use
Come
to
on now.
make it like you are unqualified for what God is calling you to do. And if he can have you believe that, if he can have you believe that you are small and flawed and you are never good enough, then you're not going to walk in that purpose that God has for your life. And that's exactly what he wants. He wants to use that shame to keep you mired in this place of self-condemnation.
Mm, 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 mm. Mm.
Whereas when we walk with Christ, there is no condemnation in Christ.
None. And friend, as you're listening to this, I want you again, hold space, ask yourself some questions. Do I feel condemned? Do I feel like I don't want to be fully known? Do I feel like I just would prefer to hide and shrink and not even put yourself out there, but not be known? That is condemnation. Does the past come up in your mind and your failures and the things that you really don't want anybody to know about? And it causes you to shrink back. That is condemnation, and that is the enemy coming to kill, steal, and destroy. And he may not take the physical from you, but he's taken your life. God's called you to a vibrant, amazing, fully alive, fully charged life. That's what he wants for you. And when you are in any bit of these shame cycles, that's the enemy's job. But there's a
Yes.
better way. Go ahead, Rachel. Sorry.
Yes, yes, definitely. I heard it said that these shame scripts have the signature of Satan on every one.
Oh,
And I love that. And I believe that's true, because shame really is, and this is one of my favorite kind of acronyms for a definition of shame, that it's self-hatred at my own expense. That's what shame does. It is
yes.
that voice of, I'm not lovable exactly as I am. That if anybody really knew the real me, then they wouldn't want to have anything to do with me,
Mm, yes. Yes. Let me peel back the curtain, the curtain of my life, not just the shears where you can see through and let people see what you want to see. I'm talking about the blackout curtains that are in the hotel room that keep every bit of the light out, like straight up those heavy curtains, and let people see. Wow. Okay. This was super enlightful, very helpful. A lot to take in. This is going to be a lot. Listen, my aunt used to say, swallow it whole, chew it up on the way down. You might need to listen to this podcast a couple of times to go back and get the nuggets that Rachel shared with us. I know that you had some books that you wanted to recommend and some tools. So, Rachel, can you just give us a list of the books that you think would be helpful if somebody wants to dive deeper on this?
Sure, absolutely, yes. So Dr. Brene Brown, a lot of people probably have heard of her. She is one of the prominent shame researchers of our
Mhm.
time. And she's also a Christian as well. So her books, The Gifts of Imperfection, and I Thought It Was Just Me, are two really wonderful resources for
Mm.
anyone wanting to dive deeper in understanding shame and understanding how perfectionism can be problematic in our lives and lead to other mental health disorders, issues with depression and anxiety and feelings of unworthiness and addictive behavior. So those are really great books on the topic. Uh, Another book that is really excellent is Dr. Alita Edwards' book, Fear at the Abyss, um, understanding the connection between perfectionism and shame proneness. And now hers is written from a more clinical perspective. Okay. So that one, you're not going to get the Christian perspective on the topic, but it still has its merits and it's still a good resource for understanding the connection between shame and perfectionism.
Okay, amazing. Um, so if you are in Mississippi, which I actually have a lot of Mississippi, this is where I live, but if you live in Mississippi and you are looking for a therapist, you can work with Rachel and see her information. And I'm going to add her link to the show notes so you can check it out there. And what I would like to say is that if you are struggling with this, if you're struggling with these symptoms that she talked about, or if you're finding yourself stuck in patterns, seek out some help. I definitely believe in having a good Christian counselor, a therapist. I have had them all, a mentor, a coach, someone who sees the best in you, someone who's able to, if things are just messy in your mind and you want different and you're having a hard time getting there, go reach out to someone. Reach out to someone and get some help because you're called for more. Like she discussed, you are called for more. And the enemy is a roaring lion. And there's so much power in getting the help that you need, but there's healing on the other side. So, dear friend, I just want to encourage you to do that. Well, Rachel, I appreciate. Is there anything that you would like to share before we wrap up this podcast?
I would just like to say you are absolutely right that the antidote to this shame is finding safe people in your life that you can talk about this and you can feel seen, because shame makes us want to, like Adam and Eve, it makes us want to run and hide. It makes us sometimes go to things like perfectionism as a protection strategy so that nobody sees the real flawed, broken you. They only see the perfect facade, right? And so the only way we can move past that is to be fully seen and know that we are still accepted and loved in our brokenness and with our. And so finding those safe people, and you don't need one person to be your safe person for every aspect of shame you may be dealing with, right? You can be selective about that. That this person in my life is a really good person I can go to about this, but maybe they're not the person that would be safe for me to go with this other thing. We can't expect this one person to be our everything, right?
Mm-mm.
So having different people in your life that you can come to and discuss some of these issues where you struggle with shame, or saying, I want the safety and support of a trained professional who is going to be non-judgmental. I want that confidentiality and privacy, and seeking out, a professional counselor to be that person for you. Like you mentioned, if you're in the state of Mississippi, I would love to work with you. If you are looking for a Christian counselor, a very great place to find another Christian counselor in your state is to go to the association, the American Association of Christian Counselors at aacc.net. And you can look for a Christian counselor in your area. And it can also be in the church, right? Going to your pastor, going to other leaders in your church, or finding someone who isn't a believer within your church community that you feel safe with, and coming to this person and allowing yourself to be seen and to be honored, to know that you are still good and loved, and that your identity is in being a son or daughter of the true King, and you are a reflection of his image. And that is how you are made perfect in all of your imperfection.
Mm, mm. So good. So much wisdom. And I just want to say real quickly that there is freedom on the other side. I was bound by indecision, seeking validation, looking for others' approvals. I felt like I couldn't trust myself to make a right decision. I was stuck in cycles of perfectionism in different pockets of my life. I wouldn't have looked at myself as a perfectionist. I think others pegged me as one, but I wouldn't have seen that on my own. Um, Talk about paralysis and not moving forward. I was so stuck. And I would just want the woman that's hearing this, I want you to hear my heart. I want you to hear my soul. If that's where you are right now, that's where I was. And there is freedom for you on the other side. But you got to do the work. If you stay in those cycles and you don't do the work, you're going to wake up a decade from now, right where you were. So I want to encourage you, get the help. Start with a book. There's nothing wrong with that. Start with a book. Get some support. Reach out to Rachel. Grab these books. Come join my mentorship. And do the work, though. It's going to require you to step out and do something different. That's scary. That is just scary. But I want to share with you, there's freedom. And that's our hearts for you. That's why we did this podcast, is we want you to know that you don't have to live this way. Even if you're not fully in the depths of stuck in shame cycles, but you heard part of this. Keep doing the work. Do the work. Walk worthy of the calling for which you are called. Walk in a more excellent way. There's more for you. In God's being everything, fully alive to the woman that He has created you. Become her. Become her. And that's so empowering. It's so empowering when you realize, oh, okay, wait, I can take action. I can change this narrative. I get to actually, especially with the power of the Holy Spirit, I get to change the way I'm showing up and the way that I living my life. That's powerful. There's freedom. There's wholeness. God wants you to live wholeheartedly. Oh my goodness. Okay, Rachel, thank you, thank you, thank you. We're going to include all of her show notes, the links to connect with her in the show notes. So you guys connect with her. And if you found value in this podcast, would you please leave a review? That actually is a huge deal in the podcast world. So you would go, I don't know, each platform's a little bit different. So go and leave us a review. And then also share this. Hold on your podcast, hold your phone down where it says paste or copy, and then go and text it to 3 girlfriends that you know are stuck in some variation of this and that need some freedom in their life, and send it to them and say, you've got to listen to this. Share this podcast, share this word. All right, my friend. Well, Rachel, thank you, thank you, thank you. And
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on, Amy. I think this is a really important message, and I love the work that you do and how you're helping.
thank you. And I would love to have you back on the podcast soon if you would be open to that. I feel like we need to continue this conversation.
Yes, absolutely. I would love that.
Oh, amazing, amazing, amazing. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much. Be sure and tune back in next week. I have another really beautiful interview, and we're talking about depression and anxiety, kind of continuing this mental health conversation. So, all right. Well, thank you so much for tuning in today. Share this, and I will see you guys on the next one. Bye. Girlfriend, thank you so much for listening to the podcast. I'm so honored you come back every week and that you share the Fit Soul podcast with your friends and family. Every time you share my podcast on Instagram or Facebook, I do a little happy dance. Make sure you subscribe to the Fit Soul podcast where you'll never miss an episode. You can go to Podcast, Apple, Stitcher, and Spotify and subscribe so you'll never miss an episode release. And just know, I truly love bringing you excellent content and great guests to provide you motivation and faith inspiration to help you walk worthy. And one of the ways you can help me is to go and leave the Fit Soul podcast a review. If you have just a moment, would you please go over and leave a review for the Fit Soul podcast? Thank you again. I love you. And here is your reminder. You are worthy. Until next time. Bye-bye.